Last night in Almaty, Kazakhstan's biggest city, this is what a crackdown sounds like. This morning, an uneasy calm on the streets of the city. And by calm, read fear.
At night, when we hear explosions, I'm scared. It hurts to know that young people are dying. I'm a mother myself, and it hurts my heart.
Kazakhstan's Interior Ministry said today that 26 protesters had been killed, more than 3,000 people detained. They also said that 18 law enforcement officers had died in the violence. The government in Kazakhstan is describing the protests as a colour revolution orchestrated by unnamed terrorists and malign foreign powers. Cue this address by the president this morning.
Terrorists continue to damage public and private property and use weapons against citizens. I gave an order to law enforcement agencies and the army to shoot to kill without warning.
Tokayev even put a number on what he described as the bandits who attacked the city, 20,000 strong, according to him. There has been looting and violence directed at security forces, but to describe protests sparked by a fuel price hike as the mobilization of an underground army is at best a stretch. It is the narrative, though, being used to justify inviting Russian troops in by the thousands. Deployed under the umbrella of a post-Soviet military alliance, but the first time the alliance has deployed in this way. Today we spoke to a member of the Kazakhstan opposition living in exile in Belgium.
It completely changed the geopolitical balance in the region. Right now we are not just protesting against the change of the regime, it's now turning into the freedom movement against the foreign occupation. They basically gave the keys to Putin.
The fear among opposition leaders inviting Russian troops is one thing, getting them to leave is sometimes another. The crackdown has been concentrated in the main city Almaty in the east of the country. 1,700 miles west, though, where the protests started, people are continuing to demonstrate peacefully, unhindered by police. The scene in Aktau today, for example, and in Zanauzin. Internet connection is being blocked in parts of the country as well, an attempt by the government to control the narrative. But it's had other consequences. The country is highly advanced when it comes to everyday payments made electronically, which have been disrupted. Also, Kazakhstan is a global leader when it comes to the cryptocurrency business. The operations at building-sized server centres have also been affected. Today, Kazakhstan and indeed the region grappling with how this will end. Tonight, though, ahead of the weekend, reports coming in from Almaty of more shooting.
Well, I've been speaking to Ivo Dolder, who served as the US permanent representative for NATO, and I asked him what he thinks the situation in Kazakhstan tells us about President Putin and his power in the post-Soviet region.
The story is that he is deeply concerned about the kind of popular uprising that is happening in Kazakhstan that we've seen before in Georgia, of course, in Ukraine and in Belarus just last year, and that he worries that an uprising like this can spill over into Russia and affect his regime. He's trying to reassert control over key parts of the former Soviet Union. As Putin has said, the greatest catastrophe of the geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was the breakup of the Soviet Union. He's trying to reestablish it.
Because for the last few weeks, of course, many eyes had been trained on the Ukraine border and what Russian ambitions might be there. How do these two things link up?
Well, I think this one was quite unexpected. Indeed, the military forces that Russia normally has deployed on the southern border with Kazakhstan were redeployed around the border with Ukraine as part of this 100,000 troop mass concentration of armor and capabilities that is now surrounding the northern, eastern, and southern part of Ukraine. And it does raise the question, does he want to have a two-front war? Is this the time for him to be both involved militarily in Kazakhstan, which is happening today, and in Ukraine? And it makes, in some ways, the discussion that we're going to have next week, first in Geneva and then in Brussels and finally in Vienna, with the Russians more interesting. Maybe he's now looking for a way out.
The entirely different geopolitical sense, though, with Kazakhstan is the Chinese element on the other side, that the real geopolitics is between Russia and China there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's kind of interesting to see what will happen because, of course, the Chinese, rightly, as you say, have an interest in this part of the world. Their much vaunted Belt and Road Initiative goes in part through the Stans. There's energy in Kazakhstan that is of interest not only to the West, which has invested great amount of money in extracting the energy, but also to the Chinese. And it will be very interesting to see what the conversation is going to be between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in early February when President Putin travels to China for the opening of the Beijing Olympics. Because here is it seems to me a clash of interest rather than a coincidence of interest between these two major powers.
So what should NATO ministers be thinking about as they look on all of this?
Well, I think they should be thinking about two things. One is to continue to think about what can we do to persuade Russia not to further invade Ukraine. That has been the #1 issue for a number of months now, and NATO has put forward both a deterrence posture by saying that the U.S. and Europe and the U.K. would be prepared to implement significant economic sanctions to beef up the military presence on NATO territory in Eastern Europe, and of course to continue to support Ukraine in its right to defend itself, but at the same time also to offer a diplomatic opening and to say we need to have a conversation about the future of European security, not just about Ukraine, not just about NATO, but about the future of European security. Back in the 1990s, we had a whole series of arms control negotiations and agreements, many of which have now been either dismantled or no longer observed. We need to go back to creating a security environment that is transparent, more predictable, in which we don't see hundreds of thousands of troops being amassed along the borders of other countries without notification or without real provocation, and to have that kind of dialogue. That's what I think NATO is offering the Russians, and the question is, will the Russians agree?
Ivo Dolder, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.